Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 15th of April. Oh, lovely tax day. Yes, the excitement of it. Well, market stabilizing inside of here. And of course, this is a balancing of this whole tariff construct and where the economy actually is in a broader context. Now, from a global standpoint, you can see that. We see the actual effect of what China is doing to try and stabilize their situation because frankly, they're in a world of hurt as much as they're trying to sell that the U.S. is the one that suffers the problem in this case. Turns out they're selling 250 billion plus worth of U.S. Treasuries in the open market, which is driving Treasury yields down, which we now see. They've also prevented brokerage firms from selling more than a few million dollars worth of securities on their exchanges, so they don't have a market collapse. Otherwise, they've told the brokerages that you will be wiped out and not allowed to conduct business in China. So they're doing everything they can to save. A major collapse within their own setup while they then quietly will have to devalue the yuan at the same time. Now, from our standpoint here, we look at this right up against that 50%, and this was the concern that we had being up at this elevated level with the MBI Magenta. Likely that it's still, as long as it stays above the MBI White, fine. We'll continue to bounce a little bit, but it could have perturbations where we can get above that 50% mark. But you really likely need to see shakeout above zero. And if shakeout does not move towards that zero and begins to roll over again, then we're looking at another phase down. Now that's likely to be another consolidation period that will be at the mid or lower level, but likely would have a higher peak, and that where you would get a divergence for an upside breakout later on. More likely when we start to see the effects of positive impacts from the changes in the latter part of the year, just as we talked about. So you can see that building. It hasn't happened yet, but if as the trajectory is based on what we can see, that would be the expected. Now, that bars any unforeseen uh, developments, but as it stands, while there was this shock and awe of the developments that created these moves, at the end of the day, there's a practical element that leads to them. But China can play the game for only so long because they only have so many U.S. Treasuries. They've been reducing from trillions down little bit by little bit, and if it's absorbed, which it has been at this particular stage, they're using it to buy yuan to keep their currency from completely collapsing at this particular stage. They can only do it for so long. And then it'll become obvious because once they get past their third-party buyers, and then they have to do it themselves. They've been using, European brokers that have had their securities and stuff just to disguise it. But that size, you can't pretend that it's not happening because it can be seen. From the NQ standpoint, you can see it's closer to the positive shake at -5, but you're at that inflection point, and that you're below the 50% is problematic. I will say it. Got to see that push above it, and that's going to take probably a bit more time, simply because of you need some kind of data to justify that things are going the right direction. So you can see what that as the we're moving higher, and then all of a sudden, boom, yields start to decline, and that is that selling pressure, which is not a bad thing because from a consumer standpoint, it's going to improve things from mortgages on down in a broader context. And notice how the Fed was so active during Biden years. Every minute you hear about the Fed doing this, that, well, nothing. I never heard the Fed even speak. And when they do, it's this muted, like, well, we're just going to sit on the sidelines for now and wait and see. But this becomes your critical marching point right here, and it's something we've been talking about for a while. Oil dictates, and it's a precursor of where we can see inflation going. And then you get these funny things where, like, the University of Michigan sentiment and stuff were completely skewed based on political configuration, and the reality is the Fed numbers coming out show much weaker inflation. I think theirs could be relatively high. You move oil into the mid 50 range, and you could get to almost a zero or a negative inflation, which they don't know how to handle, and that would be a shock. if it happened. Of course, this is exciting news for the euro, and then they think the dollar is collapsing. And this is, of course, China thinking that they're putting pressure on the U.S. by doing this. Um, but it's short-lived, and it only hurts the Europeans who aren't really buying all that many U.S. goods makes them cheaper, but with the tariff add-ons that are taking place, it becomes a net zero. So there's effectively no change at all, despite what you hear. So don't be fooled by the rhetoric. It becomes pretty obvious because that corresponding rise in the euro, along with the extra tariffs, becomes a net what? Nothing. So, from a gold standpoint, though, it's still this belief that inflation is going to rise relative to this. Not likely. I think this is more about the currency war that's brewing and who's going to come out on the top side of it. Um, it's going to take some time to find out, but a big battle. It's not small by any stretch of the means. Bitcoin breaking out slightly above there. It still has the rising MBI white with the magenta. So you've got potential short cover from an ETF standpoint where people are trying to hedge in between. But it's relatively mirroring the NASDAQ at this particular stage. ETH, completely separate situation. They're still trying to convince everybody that it's the way to go, and not many people are buying it anymore. When we look at it from a intraday standpoint, it's pretty much sideways trade going across. We did see an elevation. MBI white and that spike caused a little bit of a dip. It didn't make it back down to 50%. So that is going to be problematic if we get any magenta dip below the 25 here now. And an MBI white increase at that particular stage would definitely indicate future selling. What we did have is complete DOC steel reset, which with this step down is enough to force a continuation in the move to the upside. And if we break past that 100, not being consistent with what we're seeing, not to mention shakeout just right on the cusp here, the solid side. So if it's able to continue to build that, that would build momentum. And of course, you're looking to see where if it can break past that 55, 20-ish range. So could take a little bit, but we do have that MBI white spike, and that typically calls for that pullback. So we'll be keeping an eye on that one. We can see that resolve itself intraday at any time. And this is what it did look like from a tighter time frame intraday. Fairly decent. A lot of people call that kind of thing a double top. It's not so much valid in the intraday chart, but that's okay. What we did get was the turnaround MBI white lead, and that led to the lows that came through, and then you ended up with a potential move coming back. Didn't quite happen, and that's when magenta took over, and that's an indication you're going to head to the 100%, and which we eventually did get close to at that particular stage, and then we got the second round of dip, all being resolved, of course, here in the European session, which is poking up towards new highs right there, and then it had a little dip, and now it's working its way back up again. So should be fairly decent from an open standpoint. Nothing too dramatic, but all in line with expectations of the reading. So looking good. But from a broader geopolitical standpoint, I think that war is going to start heating up economically between China and U.S. And how that's played out and how careful that is really going to be the real test. And so far, U.S. is on the upside of it because they have less to lose because they're not really trading that much with China. So, other than China importing goods into America, take it for what you will believe based on what you hear. But a lot of the narratives that I hear are just way off. They just don't understand true economics of how things actually play out. But that's okay. We don't care. We just follow the readings. Always trade well. Have a good one. We'll catch you on the flip side. Anything relevant, I'll put on the Skype chat.